Hey everybody, I'm Mike Settele, the founder of Settele Tutoring, and I'm making this kind of low-tech quick video because the December SAT is just 2 days away, and I've been getting asked for a prediction video. I didn't realize this was a thing, but apparently it is. People have channels where they predict what's going to be on the SAT. Let me just start by saying that, if you've been studying and taking practice tests, then you can predict what's on the SAT because they do not change the topics. It's all the same stuff all the time. Certain topics might not appear, but there's pretty much a finite list of things that could come up in the test. And if you've been studying, you should know exactly what to get. So those prediction videos, they don't really know what they're talking about. Still, I was asked to make one, and so here's my prediction for the test. It's very bare bones. It's mostly just reminders of things that you need to remember for the SAT. First, when we talk about the reading and writing, something's going to be weird, okay? You're going to get a passage, a question, a vocabulary word, something that is just weird that breaks the mold. I've been taking SATs for 15 years. You could take every example question that's that they've ever made, and you would still take a real SAT and find a few questions that break the mold, that just don't fit in with the patterns you're familiar with. That's just part of the test. That cannot be predicted, but that's okay. That's just something we need to bake into our strategy, that something's going to be weird, and we can't let it bother us. So the next piece here, don't dawdle when a question is hard. This is really important for reading, where we can lose a lot of time trying to just get a question answered that might not be worth it in the long run. 10 points per question is roughly what we're talking about. And if you spend so much time on just one random hard question that you run out of time and can't do a good job on the ones at the end that might be easier, you've wasted more points than you've saved. So you need to know when to just kind of place a smart bet. You've done enough work to maybe get down to 2 answers, to be pretty sure about what the right one is. You might not be 100% sure, but is rereading that passage again and again and again going to actually get you any closer? Probably not. If you've studied, if you're thinking about things like strong words and connotations and dumb summaries, then you probably know enough, and you probably are placing a smart bet on the answer. So just pick something and move on. With any extra time, you can always come back to that question. But one of the biggest troubles that people have on reading is that they cannot let go of questions that happen to be hard in the middle of the section, and then they lose time for the end of the section. Remember, the reading section is not organized by difficulty. So you're going to hit random hard questions all over the place, and you've got to pace yourself and not let those random hard questions completely throw you off your game. And one of the best ways to make sure that you don't have any weird questions in the writing section is to make sure that you know the grammar rules. And I've got a video on that going over all of those, so I'll just direct you to that. If you remember the kinds of rules that they ask about, it's a finite list of things. There's just not that much there to surprise you. So if you know those rules, then no prediction necessary. Those same rules are going to be on the test. So with reading and writing, my prediction is that some pieces of the test will be unpredictable. And if you can do the best job you can in all the rest, all the stuff you've seen in your practice, then you'll have enough time and confidence to deal with the truly weird, annoying, hard stuff. It's just part of the test. There's nothing you can do about it except stay calm during the test. Now for math, I want to look at some parts of the October SAT here in the United States, one of the paper and pencil tests, because I think the best prediction I can give you there is that they're, again, going to do the same thing that they always do. They're going to ask about questions that involve a lot of traps, and I know exactly where those are going to be. So let's take a look at some of them, and I'll show you what I mean and how you can best avoid careless mistakes and trap answers on the math section. The most important thing to remember about math is that it is organized by difficulty, right? So that's both sections, both the no calculator and the calculator if you're taking the last pencil and paper test in the United States, but also if you're taking the digital exam, the same stuff applies, okay? The questions are organized by difficulty, so each module is going to get harder as you go. So I'm going to focus on a paper test because that's what I've got in front of me, but basically this same stuff applies to the digital SAT as well. The first grouping of questions in the no calculator section for the paper test is going to be pretty easy. So I'm not even going to look at these, right? So we got a graph, we've got some lines, basic stuff, y equals mx plus b that you should know. So those first 5 questions, the first fourth of that section are going to be really, really easy. And that includes questions like this that look like they're going to be really, really hard. If we know where it is in the section, we know that there's probably some easy solution. So yes, because number 4, you could go through this by doing the normal kind of like plugging things in and substituting and basically solving for x and y algebraically. Or you can recognize that there's some simple answer choices here. And hey, choice C looks really, really simple. Let's see if that works, right? If we plug that in, 3 is equal to 7 minus 4 times 1. Yeah, that's true. And then, okay, 15 minus 4 times 3 is 12 is equal to 3. That's true. Hey, what do you know? We just got the right answer with barely any work and certainly no algebra. So trying the simplest answer a lot of times, especially on questions that we know are going to be easy, is actually going to save us time because we can skip all the algebra because we trust that that simple answer is very likely right on a simple question. Now, as we move through the section, now things are going to change. We can see with number 5, we've got to memorize some things about inequalities. We always plug points into equations there. I want to talk about number 7 because you're definitely going to get a question similar to this on the test. We need to know and memorize the ideas about whether or not there's no solutions, one solution, or infinitely many solutions, okay? Those rules matter. So what that basically means is it's asking about the slope of 2 lines. Now, I know that these answer choices look like one equation, but I think of them as 2 lines. And we can see on the right side, we have some pretty clear y equals mx plus b stuff going on, right? So when we're talking about no solutions, what we really need is to have the same slope, but different y-intercepts, okay? So we need to change the left sides to make sure that the right side is going to have a different slope or not. So here we go. If we do that to choice A, we would get 4x plus 4. So 4x plus 4 equals x plus 4. Those are different slopes, right? The 4 and the 1 on that x. And so those would be a system that has one solution. They intersect just once. So that's no good. Here we'd have 4x plus 4 again. But again, this hasn't changed. The y-intercept changed, but the slope did not. So this would still also just be a one solution system. Now, 4x plus 4 is equal to 4x plus 4. This is the infinitely many situation. This is what most people pick when they get this stuff wrong because they confuse what they're being asked about. So this is a good example where memorization can save you some points. There's very little algebra here. This would be the wrong answer, but it's definitely a little bit of a trap. They know that many of you are going to see that and feel really good about that connection. But what we want is the 4x plus 4 to have the same slope, but a different y-intercept, right? So what's the y-intercept on choice D? It's 0, so that's why we know we have no solutions. These are 2 lines that are parallel in the xy plane. They go on forever in the same direction, but they never cross. The SAT really loves this kind of topic, linear systems, asking about the number of solutions. So you wanted a prediction? I predict you're going to get that. This is not some revelation here, though. The SAT asks about this every time. So if you're taking practice tests, you already know they're probably going to ask about this. So hopefully this was just a review of that concept. I also want to talk about things, though, where we get to kind of like question 10. 10 to 15 is where we tend to see the hardest questions, and that's where we're going to need to avoid some traps. So if I look at this trapezoid question, they're telling me that, okay, we have 2 trapezoids. One is 3 times the length for all of its sides. So we need to think, okay, what's going to be the area of this bigger trapezoid if we know that the smaller one is 6? So what most people are going to do is say, okay, if 6 is the area of the small one and the big one is 3 times as big, well, that means that it's probably 6 times 3, which is 18. Now, even if you have no idea what's going on, you should know that that's not going to be the answer. That is way too easy for a hard question. So in the no calc section, when you're about halfway through, we got to start thinking differently about these questions. They're going to put these traps in there. If you're taking the digital SAT, again, about halfway through of both modules, you need to start watching out for trap answers. We can prove this question, we can solve it pretty easily using some hypotheticals here, but basically we want to be able to prove our answer for a question like this. So what I would do is I would kind of change the question to suit my needs. I would say, okay, trapezoids are a pain in the neck, but you know what's kind of basically a trapezoid is a rectangle, right? Basically, remember, a trapezoid looks like this, and the area of a trapezoid is the average of the bases, so base 1 plus base 2 over 2 times the height. But basically, a rectangle is a trapezoid that just has the same base on the top and the bottom. So it's really convenient. And the height is the length or the width. So it's really simple. So basically, we can do this entire question using just base times height without having to deal with the weird parabola. So let's say we have an area of trapezoid of ABCD is 6 square centimeters. So let's just make it a 6 by 1 rectangle. All right, now the length of each side of the bigger trapezoid, the bigger rectangle, is 3 times bigger. So what's our bigger one then? Well, 6 times 3 is 18, and 1 times 3 is 3. So now we can see that the actual area of this bigger trapezoid, is 18 times 3, which is 54. That's the real answer. So it's not much harder, but it's very easy to fall into the trap. That's my prediction for the SAT, especially if you're taking the paper and pencil version. The no calc always has the same kind of thing going on in this section where we expect the hard questions to be. Now, number 11 is much more about memorization. In this case, we just need to understand what this equation is telling us. It is giving us the equation of a parabola that has a vertex of -1, -9. So that's -1, -9, that's down here. And it opens upward, so it kind of looks like this. And they want us to have no x-intercepts, which means we need to move this entire thing upward. And just memorization-wise, we know that D is the answer because when we add a number to the end of an f of x, we're basically moving it up. If we subtract a number, we're moving it down. If we are moving it to the right, it's actually going to be inside the parentheses, and it's going to have a negative, which is kind of counterintuitive. We think would be the reverse. But then again, that's always how things work when we have parentheses, right? We see it right here, even in the vertex formula, that we have things in parentheses, it tends to mean that we're taking the opposite sign of what we see. That's just a common thing in algebra. So yeah, D would be the answer here. We just need to make sure that we are aware of how things translate in the XY plane. But that question, not as interesting to me. Number 12 is a good example where, yeah, again, you have to memorize something. But as I was saying in the reading section, if something is going to be time consuming and involves a very weird, obscure topic, you've got to just place your best bet and go. This might not be a question that is worth most people's time. There's better stuff coming. Basically, in order to solve something like this, we need to convert our equation back into the x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared version of a circle. And in order to do that, you need to complete the square. I've got other videos on that. I don't want to waste your time on it now, but basically we're going to take that -10 and it's going to end up with an x minus 5 squared, because we need to take half of the b term and square it. So that's going to mean we're also adding in a 25 to the right side of the equation for balance, right? So 5 squared, that's where that's coming from. And then y minus 3 would be minus 3 squared. And that means we have to add in a 9 to balance things out. So 25 and 30 is 55 plus 9. 55 plus 9 is 64. So that means our radius is 8. And so what is the area of the circle? That's pi r squared, so 64 pi. That's a lot of work for just 10 points. It's not a high priority question. But remember, if we're thinking about this as being a hard question and we know kind of how this works, even if we don't remember how to complete the square, we might be able to get this recognizing that B and C are probably not very nice answers because the numbers are so weird. And we can kind of see a relationship between A and D, right? 8 and 64. And we know that radius involves squaring in lots of different places. So maybe that's why we just kind of picked D out of just a sheer guess, because we kind of see maybe how that could come about. That's not a great reason, but if you need to save the time for other stuff, then there you go. It's worth the time to skip that, make a smart guess, and then move on. Because all three of these questions involve strategies that you need to use on the test. So I predict you're going to have a lot of weird algebra and that the strategies will save you, especially in the no calculator section. So let's take a look at what I mean. Anytime I see crazy algebra, my thought is, can I plug points into equations? They're giving me equations here. They're not giving me points. Now, there is algebra that you can do to kind of find the answer, but I'm not going to bother with it. I'm just going to pretend for a second that x is 0. That means that this thing is equal to 0. And since the given expression above can be rewritten as a plus 20 over x plus 5, that means a plus 20 over x plus 5 can also, or should also, equal 0. It's the same thing. Now, instead of x, though, I have a 0. Right? That's what I'm doing, is I'm plugging that 0 in for the x's. I'm making it up to see what happens. And when I do, I get we get a is equal, or plus 4, 20 divided by 5 is equal to 0. So a is -4. And look, if we plug 0 in for x, all these x's are going to go away. And what are we left with? We're just left with these last numbers, and -4 is only in one of the choices, choice A, and there you go. That is the answer. So I didn't have to do any algebra. I didn't have to risk losing a negative or anything like that. I just needed to pick 0 and see what happens. This strategy really does work. 0 might not always work as a number, and we do need to check every single choice, but it's a really good strategy. I would also use it on number 14. And the reason I would use it here is basically like, this looks crazy. So what I would do is I'd say, okay, You want me to convert this thing? Let's just say for a second that both D, E, and F, all three of them are equal to 1, meaning that these are all 1 over 1. So 1 over C is equal to 3. And that can be flipped pretty easily so that C is equal to 1/3. So basically now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my values for D, E, and F as 1, and I'm going to plug them into all the answer choices and see if anything gives me 1/3. Well, no, this would give me 1 plus 1 plus 1, so that's 3, no good. This would give me 1 times 1 times 1, that's 1 over 3, so that looks good, but we got to keep going. This one be with 3 over 1, right? 1 plus 1 plus 1 over 1 times 1 times 1 times 1, so that doesn't work. But this one also would be 1 over 1 times 1 plus 1 times 1, you get the point, and so this was going to be also 1/3. So this happens sometimes with the strategy. This does not make me panic. I'm just like, okay, fine, I got rid of 2 answers, and now all I need to do is pick some new numbers. So why don't we just say for a second that all of them are 2 this time? Now that would mean that 1 over C is equal to 1/2 plus 1/2 plus 1/2. 1 over C is 3/2, so C is equal to 2/3. Now we go back down and we look at B and D and we try the same thing. So B would be D times E times F, so that's 2 times 2 times 2 over 2 plus 2 plus 2, so that's 8 over 6. But 8 over 6 is not equal to 2/3, so B seems wrong. Let's try D. To keep it short, that would be 8 over 2 times 2 is 4, plus 4, plus 4, so that's 8 over 12, which reduces to 2/3. Hard question that we just got right with very little algebra, right? So maybe your algebra could have gotten you this. Maybe you could have gotten an answer quicker using algebra, but knowing where I am in the test helps me think about potential traps. And I don't trust my algebra, I don't trust my work, because they're really good, the SAT, of setting you up to fail on these kinds of hard questions. And number 15 really gets to that. Almost everyone puts choice C here. That is a huge trap. The reason they put it is like, oh, the cost of renting a bicycle is $8 for the first hour. That sounds like a y-intercept, right? That sounds like a starting point. And then $4 for each additional hour. That sounds like a rate. That sounds like a slope. And so 4h plus 8 seems right. But this is supposed to be the hardest question. Now, the difficulty resets when we get to the grid-ins on the paper and pencil test. So this is technically the last question in the mini section here of multiple choice questions. So we would expect it to be really hard. Did that seem really hard to just be like the slope is 4 and the y-intercept is 8? No, that was like as easy as could be. That's like a number 3 type question, not a number 15. So what we need to recognize here is they're definitely messing with us, and you can't just pick the first answer that comes to mind. You've got to prove that answer. And we're going to use it using the plug points. We're going to prove it using the plug points into equation strategy, and we're going to pick a point that they gave us. What did they tell us the first point is? It was $8 for the first hour. So if the points are H comma C, then the first hour is $8. And if we plug that into choice C, we see that doesn't work, right? 4 times 1 plus 8 is 12, not 8. Now, if we do that for all the choices, right? 8 minus 4 is 4, so that doesn't work. 8 plus 12 is 20, that doesn't work. But look, 4 times 1 is 4, plus 4 is 8. Proof that D is the answer. That is how you have to do this section of questions. It's going to be hard. They're going to try to trick you, and they will kind of create these questions where there's an answer that seems really, really obvious. You got to prove it. You've got to actually use some sort of numbers to show that that answer actually is right. And plugging points into equations is the main strategy. I've been predicting that for years, that most of the questions on the SAT can really be thought about in terms of points and equations. So whether you're watching this in December 2023 for that exam, or you took a time machine and went back to December 2013, my advice would be the same. My prediction would be the same. They're going to give you these hard questions, and they're going to involve trap answers. You need to plug points into equations to avoid those traps. But if you are taking the paper and pencil test, one last piece of advice. Remember, the difficulty does reset when you get to these free response questions. So you can see here, 5r equals 3r plus 3, right? Subtract 3r. We get 2r is equal to 3, divide r is 3/2, right? So that's really, really easy. So don't run out of time and miss out on some of these easy questions that come at the end here. You really want to make sure that you save time for those, because those are some easy points. Well, I hope this is helpful. I don't want to waste any more time. Basically, if you're taking the test in 2 days, the best thing you can do is focus on things that are memorization based. So look at my videos for the grammar rules, look at my videos for the math formulas, but also think about what I said about math strategies. Plug points into equations. I've got a lot of lessons that can help you with that stuff. So hopefully you've been subscribing and watching those for a long time, and then you already are the best predictor of what's going to be on the test because you've been practicing, you've seen practice tests. It's going to be very, very similar. Don't let the weird stuff bother you. There's always some weird stuff. But if you've been studying, all the other stuff will be fine, and you can spend as much time as possible on the weird stuff and use the strategies to make the algebra disappear on math so you don't fall for trap answers. Thanks so much for watching. Good luck on the test. And remember, please subscribe. It definitely helps me out. Thanks.